Welcome back to the Point of Order podcast, an inside look at California politics and the state legislature. I am your host, Assemblyman Josh Hoover. Very excited to have back on the pod again a returning guest, Assemblymember Greg Wallis from the 47th Assembly District, Riverside, San Bernardino counties. Welcome back to the pod, Greg.
Thanks, Josh. Appreciate you having me on again.
Absolutely.
I was getting worried I wasn't going to get an invite back. I saw you had a lot of new guests this year.
Yeah, we got all the new people, trying to get all the new legislators on here to say hey.
Very cool.
But, you know, sometimes they're not available and we need a retread.
Then you can give me a call. I love it.
That's what Joe Patterson said. He was like, yeah, just whenever. Use me as a filler.
I like it. All right, me too. Offer's always open.
You're all, absolutely. I always love having you on. A lot going on this year. How are you feeling so far? I'll just ask generally about the new legislative session, what you're working on, like what's going on for you this year so far?
I mean, I don't know how many months January was, but it felt like a long time.
For sure, yeah.
It's been good. It's been good. It's been great getting to meet our new colleagues. I think we got a lot of good members on both sides of the aisle. I think, there's obviously a massive amount of turnover.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing for us, right? We've got folks with some new ideas, with some different experiences, a lot of local government background, and I think that's going to benefit the legislature. So I'm excited about that. I think you and I both are focused on some of the same things, and we've heard it from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle as well. Affordability is top of mind, right? How can we drive prices down? How can we make California more affordable for our constituents? And so that's what I'm going to be focused on this year, and looking forward to working with all of our colleagues to deliver real results on that.
100%. Yeah, totally agree. It is funny, all the new people, like I've been having kind of some meet and greets with a lot of them.
Oh, cool.
To kind of get to know. I'm trying to go one by one there's so many. I mean, it's like I'm not even halfway through. It's like 30 something new legislators. And I love it. It's like also like the energy they bring. I mean, I've only been here 2 years, and I feel like I still bring energy, but I'm like, you really bring energy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, was I that energetic when in my first
You're like
year?
texting
I'm like,
our previous
oh
colleagues. You're like, hey.
Like, I just want to apologize.
How was I?
But it's really funny to see that too. It's like, there's just a lot of energy when you're new, right?
Yeah.
So it's been pretty cool. I do have to ask you, I noticed on the way over you have some glitter on your face.
I do.
And I'm like, what's up with that? Like, we got to explain that.
Man,
I don't know if anyone can see it on the cameras, but.
I wish I had a better story for you. It is, what's today's date? It's the 23rd?
I think it's February 24th.
February 24th. I finally took my Christmas tree down this morning before I flew up here. So
You took it down this morning?
This morning, before going to the airport. So, next time I'll try and have a better glitter story for you.
So you got your tree down on February 24th.
Yeah. Pretty exciting.
Is that the latest you've ever done it?
Oh, yeah. No, not even close. I mean, it's normally first week of January, but then when I tried to take it down this year, I got the guilt trip from the missus, and she was like, you leave every week, you go up to Sacramento, I don't have anything here. Like, can I just have my Christmas tree? So
that's so funny.
It was tough to argue with.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's I thought I was late this year. I got it down like the halfway through January.
Yeah, no,
and I was like, man, I'm way
you're
behind.
a rock star.
That's
awesome. We turned it into a
it.
Valentine's Day tree. It's actually my wife's birthday tomorrow, so
yeah,
happy birthday, Mrs. Wallace.
You just change it like the skeletons
exactly.
in people's yards, every holiday. That's good. I like it. Look, I love Christmas. I don't know if I love Christmas that much, but...
well, we'll work on that.
Hey, before we jump into the stories of the week, I did want to ask you, you're a baseball guy, I'm pretty sure.
Yes.
Like Dodgers fan.
I'm a Dodgers fan.
You're a fan of the sport, right? So there was a couple tweaks being made in baseball this year. Also, really one that's not being made, but that is being tested in spring training this year that I think is even more interesting. Really, the tweaks in baseball this year are super technical. Like one is like on like how they're allowed to shift. So like I know a few years ago they banned the shift or whatever.
I think that rule was ridiculous.
That was ridiculous.
I don't understand why you banned the shift. Dude, like if you're going to shift, just lay a bunt down and take the single. I don't understand why they thought this was a detriment to the offense.
I always used to love watching like Barry Bonds like at bat because like he's a lefty obviously, and like the entire field was just on one side of the field. It was hilarious.
Yeah, but I mean,
And obviously he could hit it over the wall, so he was never gonna like try to play the shift. But
do some like old school
Yeah.
baseball. Play some Wade Boggs stuff. Let it
Opposite
get deep.
field,
Go oppo
like-
with it. Take your single. Like I don't understand.
I get it. That was always the thing. It's like a trade off, right? It's
Yeah.
just like a trade off. So I wasn't a huge fan of that, but I think the league was trying to gin up like offense or whatever, so they banned the shift. And then so there was a small tweak on like I think I don't know, penalties or something for not doing that correctly. And then the other weird thing is I didn't realize this, but you can run through like second and third base now.
Yeah, so
Like-
I wasn't aware of that.
Which I didn't even know.
Yeah, I saw that in the
So
the
I
notes
kind of forgot about this, and I don't like that at all. I think it might be safer, but it's a lot less fun. But like you can run through, and apparently like the Yankees were taking advantage of this because it's like they would just keep running and stay out of the base path so that a guy on third could like score, and then the run would still count. And so they basically got rid of their ability to do that. But anyway, those are super. We'll see, man. I love baseball. I'm kind of a purist. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, no, I'm with you as well. I think we're getting too cute with this. I mean, and I know we talked about this earlier a little bit, but pace of play, speeding up game times, okay. Like I'm willing to entertain
Well, yeah,
some
pitch
rule
clock
changes
I was
there.
against, and now I'm like, all right, I kind of get it. I get the pace of play thing. I don't think that's as terrible, but like starting a guy on second base in extra innings, I've never understood that.
That's so
I think
weird.
that's crazy.
Does it actually like improve?
It's supposed to end the game sooner. Like that's supposed to be the
Has
goal.
it done that? Has there been data on this? I mean,
It does. Like if you start someone in scoring position every inning,
but
I
both
would
of you
think
have
it
someone
would,
in scoring
right?
position. So what's
That's true. Yeah. I don't know. I just remember like there have been games like I remember the Giants were in the playoffs a few years ago, went 18 innings. It was like
Those
two
are
baseball
great.
games.
I love that.
And it was amazing. Like
Yeah.
I had a wedding that night and I was pissed because the Giants, I'm like, this is playoffs. I want to
Yeah.
watch the game. I literally went to the wedding, came home, the game was still going.
and you watched an entire baseball game. You got 9 innings of
It's
ball.
like-
I love it.
It was awesome, man. It was like,
Yeah.
and I got to like actually experience it, but it was 18 inning game. So I think that's what they're trying to avoid. But yeah, I don't know. It's just, I don't know. The purist in me, I'm like, hey, let's keep the game, kind of how it is. What the one place where I think, so they are testing something in spring training this year, and I'm actually going to go to Scottsdale this year and
Oh, cool.
and for a couple games, and so they're going to be testing a rule.
You're a Giants fan, right?
I'm a Giants fan.
Who's your
yeah.
major league team?
What do you mean? Like,
Well, like that's like a minor league.
shut up. I just got that. I was like, damn it, he's trolling. All right. Yeah, dude. The Giants kind of are a minor league team right now. I'm not gonna lie,
I mean, I'm a Dodgers fan,
but they have
so
some good. They have
life's
some
good
good
for us right
They
now.
have some good young guys. I think
Yeah.
they'll be fun. They'll be fun. But I think the Dodgers. Dude, the Dodgers are stacked. I mean, it's pretty hard to beat the Dodgers. So, but yeah. So they're doing this thing in spring training where you can challenge ball and strike calls. So they have this actually makes sense. It's
They've
kind of
been
like
doing
the
this in minor
tennis
league
system.
for
They've
like
been doing
5
it in
years or
minors.
something, yeah.
And they have this camera system that actually knows the strike zone, and it actually adjusts based on height too of the batter.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And so, and it perfectly like can see strike or ball. And so every team gets 2 challenges per game. And if you win the challenge, you get to keep the challenge. So you can,
I
in
think
theory.
I think I like that rule.
I actually love it. I
Yeah.
think it's great, and that's one area where I'm like, okay, and it's super fast, right? It's not like
So I think it
basketball.
was a Dodgers Giants playoff game a few years back, and there was a called third strike to end the game, and that ball was a ball and a half outside of the zone.
Yep.
And you don't want to send a team
that
home.
was the worst, man.
Yeah. So that
Was
would be a
that
good
on?
example.
I couldn't remember if they called a swing, there was a check.
It might have been a check swing,
then,
but
like, but
either
I
way,
don't
you
know.
should be
Either
able
way,
to
that was
review that.
awful.
You can't send a team home after playing a 162 game season and end it on something like that. That's just not right.
No, I totally agree. So that'll be interesting. I'm interested to check that out. Apparently, it's super efficient and quick, and you just say, "Hey, challenge that one," and then it's like tennis, where they just show the
Oh yeah,
computer
cool.
thing. And honestly, that made tennis a lot better because then people stopped haggling over the lines
Yeah.
and everything. So we'll see. I think the question is it a step towards like fully robotic umpires? Which, people are like against that because the human element, which I get because you love having like the real umpire. But why couldn't you just like have an umpire back there that's just like calling out the computer's thing.
Yeah, there's
Like,
some
you know
sort
what
of
I mean? Like you can just keep the but like just have them call instead of like judging it. You just have them call it. You know, I don't know. That's probably
it'll be
kinda
interesting to
silly.
see where it goes.
Anyway, so it'll be fun.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to baseball season. Obviously, the Sacramento Kings, my basketball team, are not playing great, and they're barely fighting in the playoff race. So I'm like, it's time for baseball.
I mean, I'm
It's
looking
time for
forward to having the
baseball.
A's up here. I think that's going to be cool too. You going to go out to a game?
I don't know. I'm really excited about having the A's in Sacramento. I do want to go to a game, but it's such a small stadium. I've heard like it's selling out like crazy, and it's super expensive because there's just no seats.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm gonna go if I can for sure.
Yeah,
but
same.
it might not be to see my team. I might just go to
Just go check
some
it out.
random game.
I think it's cool.
It'll be fun. So let's dive into the stories of the week this week. First one off the top, like bill deadline was on Friday. How many bills you got, by the way?
20.
Okay.
I thought it was 18, but I learned today 20.
Yeah. All right. There you go, man. I actually have exactly 20 as well.
20? Okay.
So it's funny because they changed the bill limit this year. In our previous session, we had 50 bills per year, which, in my opinion, way too many bills. This session, we can only introduce 35. I think a much better number. And so I guess we've just bitten off a bigger piece of it in our first year of the session. So.
Yeah, I think that was inevitable when you have that many new
Yeah.
members coming in. They're obviously excited. You talked about the
Yeah,
energy,
exactly.
and people want to make sure their ideas, get introduced. And obviously, you're going to introduce more in the first year than the second year. You can turn them into 2-year bills if they need more work. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think that's probably what you're seeing. But ultimately, this is going to be a positive change and reduce the bill load. I have heard from our friends in the advocate space that it's been harder shopping bills this year. It's been harder to find
I can
authors.
imagine it's way harder. I mean, what is that? 15 times 80 fewer bills?
Yeah.
Like slots. So
Yeah.
I can imagine that's harder. So Chris McKaylee, he's obviously an advocate, but he's also kind of our resident legislative expert.
Mm-hmm.
And he's actually been on the podcast a couple times too, but he put out a tweet that in the first year where bill introductions were reduced to 35 bills per assembly member and senator, there were 2,300, let me read that, 2,350 bills introduced this year. Last year, when the bill limit was higher, there was actually 2,124. There's actually fewer bills introduced.
We're going the wrong direction. Okay.
So we're going the wrong direction. So it's kind of funny that like we reduced the bill limit substantially, and yet we introduced more bills in the first year of the session. So,
yeah, well, I don't know.
I think it might make sense.
I think it might balance out in the end. I mean, we both had 20 of our 35, so it's
So we
not
got
like we're-
15 left, right?
Right.
So I think, obviously that guarantees though that next year we're gonna have a lot fewer bills, which I think is actually I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that's
So-
a great thing. I mean, it didn't. I don't know. I've been debating whether or not I should bring this up, but it didn't eliminate all the silly ideas. Did you see? There's a bill to make Bigfoot our state cryptid.
So okay, let's talk about it because it's on here. It's
on
on
there?
this list.
Okay.
Let's just talk about.
I jumped ahead. I'm sorry.
First of all, what is a cryptid? I'd never even heard that word.
No idea.
It's,
Had to Google it.
We're gonna look it up here, but I should have had that ready to go. I didn't even know. Like my grammar thing on my notes, like didn't
it
even
says
recognize it as a word.
It's spelled incorrectly when
Yeah,
it's got
so
the
I
little
was
red
like,
underline on it.
what is so? But according to Google, a cryptid is a creature that people believe exists, but that has not been proven to exist.
Okay.
I didn't even know that word exists.
Well, then Bigfoot would be appropriate.
So yeah, cryptids are often featured in stories and folklore. So one of our colleagues introduced a bill to make Bigfoot our state cryptid.
Yeah.
Like, first of all, isn't Oregon going to have a problem with this? Like,
They
I thought
might.
Bigfoot was like an Oregon thing, but
Yeah, I don't know. That's you guys up here in the northern part of the state. I'll let you.
yeah, like you don't even have
battle it
any
out.
Bigfoot anything.
Yeah,
Like, I don't
no.
know. So I don't know. I think that's bizarre.
I
but-
mean, I think state symbols are important. I actually really like them. I'm glad that we recognize,
well, like a state flower,
Yeah,
or like a
100%.
state. I don't know.
I mean, like, for example, I have a bill to make solar the state energy. I think
you
that's a
really?
big deal.
Oh my
I think you should support
All right.
that. You should
All
come
right,
on to
all
that
right.
one.
I'll take a look. I'll take a close look at that
Okay,
one.
I
Greg.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
But cryptids, I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
It's just funny we're naming something a state thing that doesn't even exist, but whatever. Honestly, most of these state things come from
I
like.
think Google said hasn't proven yet. to
Okay, that's
exist.
fair. Touche. That's a fair point. I think most of these end up coming from like elementary school class like ideas for like legislators and stuff. I don't know if that's the case in this situation, but
there ought to be a law competitions.
yeah,
and
like a
things
lot of
that.
those end up being like, hey, we should create a state
Well,
seashell.
that's fun.
Or,
Then now you're making me feel like I need to support this because I think it's
I'm not
cool when
saying that was for
legislators
this
do
one,
that
but
and get
yeah.
kids involved in the civic process. So
Yeah. So what yeah, we'll see how that one fares. See if there's any controversy around. Should there be some? Is there some other famous cryptid that?
I'm already working on my floor speech. I haven't picked which side I'm going to be on, but I'm ready to debate that.
You're just ready to go. I love it. So, in all seriousness, I mean, moving to a different story that I think is something you're working on a lot about. So, one of the big stories last week was that California's new fuel rules under the low carbon fuel standard were rejected by the state's legal office. So, the Office of Administrative Law basically, usually it's kind of a rubber stamp where you just they sign off on these regulations and they're like, that's fine. But these particular set of rules were very controversial, mostly because they have the potential to raise California gas prices by as much as, or actually at least 47 cents per gallon. Some studies actually say it would be even more than that.
Yeah.
These new regulations, and so the Office of Administrative Law basically came out and said that they have to check whether regulations are clear, necessary, legally valid, available to the public. They raised some flags on the clarity of these rules. And so basically kicked them back to the administration and the agency to resubmit them within, I think, 120 days. What are your general thoughts on LCFS? And tell me about some of the stuff. I know you're working on this, maybe even this week, doing some stuff. So
yeah, I mean, we introduced AB 12 almost immediately in this legislative session. I think the first day we were allowed to introduce bills, we slid that across the desk, and AB 12 basically revokes CARB's LCFS new formula, and that's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head with it's an affordability thing. It's people are worried about housing costs and energy costs, and they're worried about paying their mortgage, putting food on the table, and filling up the tank. And while we pay lip service to it in the legislature, when we have these unelected, unaccountable appointed boards making rulings that are going to increase those costs, it's something the legislature has a responsibility to step in and say, hey, we're going to roll that back. So that's what AB 12 does. I think, actually, I imagine there's going to be some action on that on the floor today. So keep an eye out
and just
for that.
to be clear, we're recording this on a Monday. It'll release Wednesday. So so I think by the time this comes out, I think we'll see what you're working on, right?
We'll see what happens. But no, I think that's something that we honestly in the legislature give too much authority to unelected regulatory boards, and I think it's time we start clawing some of that back. And I think when our constituents and the voters want to hold us accountable, they need to have the ability to do that. We can't just push that off to these unelected agencies. And so, LCFS. I mean, obviously, we want cleaner fuel. We want to make sure we're reducing our carbon emissions. Everybody wants to be able to support cleaner air and healthier communities. And so I know that's part of the intent, but this was 2 days after the election, CARB met, and they passed this with very little conversation or oversight.
I think it got one no vote too only. Or something.
But I mean, no
like
transparency on the cost side of things, right?
Yeah.
And we have to balance that as well, because California is not going to solve climate change, and we're not going to solve clean air alone. We need to be the leaders of this, and the way we're going to do that is by showing that not only can we do it to where we're improving our communities from a climate and public health standpoint, but we're doing it affordably and we're doing it with reliability.
Well, and I think that's the key point is I think everyone cares about the environment. I mean, I haven't ever met a Californian that didn't care about the environment.
Yeah.
But it's about striking the right balance. And, at the end of the day, so many of these environmental regulations that have gone into place really I think it's out of balance from the standpoint it really hurts consumers. We have some amazing technological advances happening in California, and most of that's market driven. It's market driven change. The government can provide incentives, but when we over mandate a lot of this stuff too early, it really creates a lot of problems and really just increases costs for people. So I think that's where the LCFS, the low carbon fuel standard in particular, is kind of getting out of hand. And so excited to, support your efforts. And definitely want to see a better balance on that policy. And I know for a fact my constituents do not want to be paying another 50 cents per gallon in gas.
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what what it's going to come down to.
So that's good. So looking forward to seeing more of that. Speaking of, affordability, legislative Republicans sent a letter. I believe you were a signatory as well on, basically keeping an eye on any efforts to ban natural gas in California. So we sent a letter to the federal government basically asking for a review of federal preemption and maybe investigation if necessary, because this is kind of a federal issue in a lot of ways. A lot of this is regulated at the federal level. But just to put this in perspective, as we're talking about these electric mandates, there's been a big push to mandate electric homes and all electric infrastructure. Currently, right now, electricity rates are 92% higher than the national average, and natural gas costs are 30% higher. So, when you look at, even though natural gas is a little bit higher than the rest of the country, our electricity rates comparatively are insanely high. And so, are we really forcing on people basically higher rates because we're not allowing them to use natural gas moving forward? And there's at least, I think, something like 60 cities and counties in California that are working to ban natural gas. And so not only is that a problem from an affordability standpoint, it's also very controversial from a cooking standpoint, restaurants. I know a number of different diverse communities have a lot of challenges with this as well and problems with this. So, and the polling on it is just, it's not popular, right? So how can we strike a better balance on that as well and not ban this fuel that people really want to use and that keeps their costs down? So.
Well, and all right, so that's, yes, I was a signatory to the letter and agree. And, personally, I'm going to keep my gas stove. That was, sort of a precursor for buying the house.
Exactly,
when we bought our
right?
house 8 years ago. My wife's like, hey, we need to have
You got to have it, yeah.
You got to have the gas stove. But I actually have a bill that's sort of in this space that would essentially require you to allow propane and a propane conversion kit to be used for your gas appliances. And so the reason this is important, in my opinion, is propane's a very dense energy, but it's also extremely clean, right? And its carbon intensity score is about the same as our grid currently operates off of. And so when we're trying to make these transitions to a greener, cleaner California, and we're sending those market signals, and you mentioned this earlier, we might be mandating a little bit too much right now. I think it's really important for us to allow a transitional phase to happen too. We shouldn't just flip the switch and say, hey, it's all or nothing. We should say, hey, there's some alternatives here. It's an all the above energy strategy on how we can get clean energy into our homes and clean energy into our economy. And so I think that's kind of the balance that I'd like to see the legislature take this year. And I know I'm going to continue to work on that, being on utilities and energy and being up here. I think that's important.
Well, and that's a good point, is there's other alternatives to it than electricity, right? And I think I think to kind of finalize this point, I mean, if you look at the state of our grid in California, we're not even ready for this. I think that's kind of what people find so ridiculous, is even if you did this overnight, like our grid couldn't even handle it, right? You couldn't plug in, you couldn't swap every car in California to an EV. You couldn't swap every stove to an electric stove because we wouldn't be able to power it all. So I think that's the other part of this, where we're really putting the cart before the horse. And that's why it's so important we let the market. Honestly, I would say the market's not going to get rid of gas stoves because they're very popular with consumers, but we really need to put more of this in the hands of the market and maybe offer some incentives for certain technologies. But it's going to be interesting to see. The other part of this is building codes. So we have all these people that have lost their homes in Los Angeles. Those building codes have changed substantially since they probably built those homes. And so are they going to have to comply with all these new, instead of rebuilding the house the way it was?
That is a really interesting conversation.
It's going to be brutal. For a lot of people, it's going to make it cost prohibitive to rebuild their home. And that is something we really need to have a conversation about too. So, and this is part of it, the electric mandates, right? Yeah. So I think shifting gears a little bit to talk about homelessness. So I don't know if you saw, there was a couple big homelessness stories the last couple weeks. San Jose is shifting a lot of their money away from permanent housing to shelter. And so Matt Mahan, who's the mayor over there, announced that it was going to be, just from a pure getting a roof over people's heads standpoint, the cost and time it would take to build homes is so much longer than just the ability to shelter people, at least in the short term. And so really shifting their approach to make sure that people can at least get shelter, and then we can talk about the long-term housing, conversation moving forward. I think this is a huge signal to other big cities. I mean, San Jose is a huge city, obviously. So a shift of this magnitude, I think if it works in terms of getting people off the street, is going to be really interesting to see if other big cities start to adopt the strategy as well. And then the other one is Fremont voted.
Let me ask you this.
Oh, yeah, go for it.
I'm going a little off topic here, but I saw this on Instagram this morning, and I want to get your thoughts on it. So apparently in Japan, they have these hotels where they're just like pods. And honestly, it kind of looks like a morgue to me, but they've got basically like a hotel room that's really just kind of like a little pod, and it's a bed, and they've got all the amenities you would need, but it's just super low key, and it's a place to crash, sleep, be sheltered. You can wash up and all that. Why don't we do something like that? I mean,
like something different, something more innovative.
Yeah, I mean. What are the options out there?
I'm open to looking at it. I have never heard about it until just now. Honestly, I kind of want one of these pods for like the really long weeks in the legislature.
Right, we can throw you out there when we're on the floor till midnight and let you go take a nap.
Exactly.
I think when it comes to the homelessness conversation, obviously shelter's extremely important, but you need to have the wraparound services, and you need to be able to help people. Be able to get back out and pick themselves up. So
well, and I think that's his point too in San Jose, is they're saying like, yes, like all this shelter would also have access to all of that still. But it's just, I can't remember the number. It's something, let me see if it's in the story here. It's the amount of homeless individuals they have in San Jose it's pretty astounding. I mean, you're talking about thousands of people, right? So I think from an economic standpoint, if the goal is to get people to those services, you have to get them sheltered somewhere, and I think you have to do it as soon as possible, right? So I think that'll be interesting to watch. In a related story, Fremont voted on probably the most restrictive, I guess, camping ordinance that we've seen in California, essentially banning camping throughout the entire city. There was some language about anyone aiding, abetting, or concealing a homeless encampment guilty of a misdemeanor. So it was a pretty stringent regulation. But I do think it's in reaction to a lot of the frustration that my government is not doing anything to keep our cities safe, to keep them clean. I was just went on a trip to a couple different countries. Not more well off than California, by the way. Not a single homeless encampment anywhere, right? Like these are we're allowing this to happen. As
100%, and it's not compassionate. I mean, we're not doing anything to actually help these individuals when we're allowing these. I mean, because I can't tell you the amount of people who have come up to me in my district and said, "Hey, I really needed that care cord. I really needed that drug. I needed the carrot or the stick, and I chose the carrot. It got me clean. I've got a job. I've got a house. I've got a family now. That never would have happened had you allowed me to, California allowed me to continue to stay in a homeless encampment where I was addicted to drugs." And so I think that's the right approach. And I think we do. It might be considered a little bit tough love, but when we're talking about caring about people and caring about Californians, this is actually the best approach to be able to help them be successful.
Sure. Well, it's interesting too. I saw there was a new poll done. There was a story. I didn't put it in our show notes here, but about a poll of basically trying to say, well, the idea that folks that are homeless are addicted to drugs is misleading. And because of this new poll, and it said, well, only like 35% of people are addicted to drugs. And I was thinking to myself, like, wait a second. So I'm reading that very differently. I'm reading that we have 35% of our homeless population that needs treatment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like this idea that, it's not 50%.
Only 35%.
So it's just 35%. So it's a mischaracterization. I'm like, hold on a second. You guys are reading this all wrong. Like we have 35% of our homeless population that really needs help, right? Because you cannot get your life back on track if you're addicted to drugs. That's just the reality, right? And so I was actually really frustrated with the kind of the way the media framed it, because they were trying to say it in a sense of like, we're being mean or something.
Could
it's
be
like,
100%.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, we're not trying to identify people because we want to be mean. We're trying to identify people who need the resources and need the help. And
Absolutely.
I think like, that's a huge number to me. 35% is like, we talk a lot about housing first solutions in California, and I'm someone who has said many times, I think that's a too limited of an approach on homelessness, because for a lot of people, they need more than housing. They need treatment. And, I think that poll actually proves it, that you have at least a third of the homeless population that really needs drug treatment. So
Yeah, I mean, we absolutely need to do work in the housing space, and we need to have that conversation in California for sure. But no, you're spot on. It's the wraparound services and the treatment that we need to focus on.
Yeah, so interesting stuff. We'll see how that stuff plays out over the next few months. Another story here. I know this is an interest to both of us, but Prop 36 obviously passed by voters last year, went into effect. Was it been like a month or two now, I think, in California. And some counties are starting to say like they need funding to help enforce it, right? I mean, I think we've been really sounding that alarm too in the legislature, like, hey, the voters need this. Now the legislature needs to step up and fund it. And so we'll see how that conversation goes. I think there is some bipartisan support for that.
I mean, we couldn't have gotten a clearer signal from voters in California, right?
Yeah.
This passed in every county in the state, overwhelming support. It's ridiculous that we're not fully funding Proposition 36 and what our counties need.
Yeah, our locals are saying like, hey, like we want to enforce the law. We want to make sure that we have, fewer instances of theft, and our retail establishments are being protected.
Well, and there's a rehabilitation component
and
as
rehabilitation's being funded. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's going to be an important budget conversation. Are you on any budget committees? Or?
I'm on budget sub 3.
Which one is that?
That's education.
Educate. Oh, okay. That's funny.
Yeah, you're on a school board. You should know this.
I know what education budget committee is, but I always forget which numbers are which.
Yeah. Sub 3. That's the one I'm on.
Yeah, so we'll see. I think it'll be important budget conversation as we go through the year, and to see if we can get enough bipartisan support for that. Because if the counties are asking for it, I mean, those are Republican counties, Democratic counties. I mean, Democratic
our constituents
counties,
are asking for it. Our counties are asking for it.
Like,
let's go deliver.
All right, guys, let's
we can do
deliver
this.
Yeah, exactly.
And it should be bipartisan. I agree. I'm optimistic that it will be.
100%. So, okay, this was a fun one. I don't know if you saw it. I should mention on the Prop 36 thing, by the way. Senator Umberg, Democrat in the Senate, has introduced a bill to fund the drug courts, right? Yeah. And make competitive grants for that. So that is a good sign where we could see some bipartisan.
Yeah, I don't know that it's enough, but I do think it's a creative, clever way to try and get more funding. It's creative.
I just hope it sparks a bigger conversation.
Yeah.
So, I don't know if you saw the poll on high-speed rail.
I did.
There was like that. I think it's an Emerson poll, high-speed rail. 54. This is what all the news stories were like. 54% of people, Californians, support high-speed rail. What were your initial thoughts on that?
Okay, but that makes sense because the concept of high-speed rail sounds great, right? It passed. It was the first election I was old enough to vote, and I voted for it. I thought when, I mean, I was going to school down in L.A., and I was from the Bay Area, grew up in Saratoga, San Jose area, and I'm sitting there thinking, man, if I can get on a train and I can get up to back home in an hour and a half or whatever it was, that sounds like a great investment.
Yeah.
The problem isn't with the technology of rail or high-speed rail. It's the regulations and the all the roadblocks to actually getting it done.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's where we've got challenges here. I mean, I think if you look at down in Southern California, the Brightline's working with a public-private partnership to build a high-speed rail line from Rancho Cucamonga to Las Vegas. That thing's going to get done before the state project, and people are going to ride it.
Yeah, people are going to ride it. Yeah. So this really cracked me up. So first of all, like, look, let me just read the actual. This is what frustrates me about all this stuff. Let me read the actual poll question, because I'm like, okay, cool. That's what the voter, or the Californians said.
Yeah.
What were they asked, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the devil's always in the details. So the actual poll question in the poll was, based on what you have seen, read, or heard, do you think California's high-speed rail project between Los Angeles and San Francisco is a good use of state funds or bad use of funds? 54% said good use. Already off of that question alone, I'm like, hold on a second. How about between Merced and Bakersfield, right?
Your consultant must love you when you go through polling, huh?
All right, exactly, right? Yeah, I know. I really like to dive into this stuff. But I'm like, okay, why are we even asking people if they want to train from Los Angeles to San Francisco? Because in the current plan, that's not even happening. Like, that's not even, I mean, the deadline for the Merced to Bakersfield segment was 2033, which is, and not to mention the fact that it's like billions, hundreds of billions over budget, tens of billions over budget.
Yeah.
It was 2033. The inspector general of the project came out the other day and said, well, we're going to blow through that. There's no way we're getting done by 2033. Okay, so I'm sitting here going like, okay, you're talking about LA to San Francisco. We can't even get the Central Valley segment done that, let's be honest, not as many people are going to ride by 2033. So you're talking about something that it's like I would love an elevator to the moon, but I mean, is that
elevator.
feasible? Yeah, high-speed elevator to the moon. Like, I mean, it's like it's crazy to me that, like, yes, conceptually, if you could just, like, if you were playing a game of like Sim City and you could just place a high-speed rail between LA and San Francisco, cool.
Would love it.
But like, this is not the reality, right?
Yeah.
I would love to see people asked, like, do you support the current iteration of the project between Merced and Bakersfield? Do you support
if you
the
knew
fact
it was
that
tens of billions
it's now 150 billion versus
exactly.
30 billion, right? Or whatever,
I get that.
right? So it's just
yeah, but the frustration with this, or for me anyway, is that we have the technology to do this. We have the ability to build this project, and Californians want this project built. And we just have so much bureaucratic red tape that gets in the way to prevent anything like this to be done on infrastructure. You talk about water storage, you talk about building more highways, you talk about high-speed rail. Yeah. That's what gets in the way. And so, you hear all the time up here, well, we're the 5th largest economy in the world. We didn't just like wave a magic wand and decree that. We invested in education and infrastructure. We actually made intelligent investments that brought people out here and brought industry here. And so if we don't get our act together in the legislature to start cleaning some of that stuff up, I'm concerned with what the future looks like for us.
Yeah, for sure. It was funny, the representative from the High-Speed Rail Authority quoted in the article said the poll results show what we know from talking to Californians every day. There's strong support for building a high-speed rail line from San Francisco to Los Angeles, and people are eager to see the work completed. It's like, yeah, they are, but like
really eager.
They're really eager. They're not going to see anything for decades, right? And so I think that's where I think there's going to be a lot of federal scrutiny on this project, which I think is justified. I just think there's so many better infrastructure investments in California that we desperately need. I mean, we're talking about the grid earlier, talking about water storage with Jeff Gonzalez a couple weeks ago. I mean, these are the things that I think would still provide great jobs, right, for people that build infrastructure. And they would be investments that we can really, Californians would benefit from much sooner, right? Yeah. And I think that is... I think that's probably where we should shift our focus, but it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. So, moving on, let's see. Looking at the time, a few things. I'll keep this one super quick, but I don't know if you saw that we launched, Latino Republicans launched a Hispanic caucus.
I saw that.
I don't know if you saw that.
I accidentally showed up to one of your meetings.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we were supposed to meet, and Greg showed up. So you're now an honorary member of the California Hispanic Legislative Caucus.
I hope I get a lapel pin.
I'll just be really quick on this one because but just the reality is that there is a Latino Legislative Caucus, and it doesn't allow Republican legislators. And I think it's very clear, and they've been very clear that we are not allowed into that caucus, despite the fact that we have 9 Latino Republicans now in the Senate and the Assembly. I would call that a pretty solid number in terms of 9 leaders of their communities that could really contribute to policy discussions on issues facing Latinos and Hispanics. And I think, the fact that has always been this partisan issue, that we're barred from joining this caucus. I think, I think we just decided, look, fine. Like, you don't want to have us in that caucus. That's fine. We're going to create a caucus that is welcoming to different ideological perspectives, welcoming to different ideas, welcoming to different people from different parties. And so it is a caucus that is open to our Democratic colleagues, that they can apply for membership. But as of now, none of them have asked to join yet. So, but that's what we want. We really want to say, like, look, Latinos are not a group that's just on one side or the other side. Like, if anything, they're a group with various ideological points of view, and the issues that they care about are bipartisan issues. Affordability, public safety, job availability, making sure that their gas prices are low, right? Like, I mean, there's so many different issues that are just like all Californians, by the way, issues all Californians care about. And so I just think it'll be interesting to see. We've been talking and seeing how we can be effective just in that space, but it'll be interesting to see if any of our colleagues join.
I think it's great that you guys are doing that. I mean, I always say that Republicans, Democrats, Independents, nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. And the reason our constituents sent us up here was to get in a room together and hash it out, right? And if that means we meet in the middle, or if that means that I've learned something from your perspective and your different life experience, and that's made my idea better, then we need to actually embrace that. And so I know you and I are both in the Problem Solvers Caucus, and we take that approach, right? It's bipartisan, it's bicameral. We just focus on good ideas and good policy. So I think it's really cool that you guys are leading on that effort.
I appreciate it. That's honestly, the Problem Solvers Caucus is a great example of that, right? Yeah. It's where some of the most productive conversations actually happen, and I just think we need more of that in all these different spaces.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's the job. That's literally what we were sent up here to do.
Exactly.
So let's do it.
Well, and it's so funny because, like, I mean, the speaker, right, this year in his opening session this year, it talked all about affordability. It's like, look, that's what we're talking about too. So, yes, we're not going to agree on every aspect of that, on how to do that, but let's try to at least find the things we do agree on, right? Mm-hmm. And so it'll be interesting to see if we get any traction there. Did you see this story? California government considering taking over oil refineries in California.
I did see that story. I think that's a terrible idea.
Could not agree more. It's like
hard no.
So policymakers considering state ownership of one or more oil refineries to ensure a reliable supply of gasoline as the number of refiners in the state declines. An oil industry trade group questions whether the state would have the expertise to effectively run a refinery, citing a lack of understanding of the industry and how it works.
This is some Twilight Zone stuff, man. I mean,
it really
come on.
Go ahead. Tell me what you think.
I'm on utilities and energy. This is an area that I've followed closely, and we sit here and overregulate the heck out of this industry to run them out of the state because we tell them we don't want you here anymore because you're dirty and you're bad and you're awful and you're evil. And then we say, well, you know what? Now that you're leaving the state, we actually realize we need you, so we're going to come take it over and run it better. What are we doing? Like, what are we talking about?
It's insanity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's truly like, it's beyond hypocrisy, right? It's like, it's the Twilight Zone. I mean, it's like, we literally have said and passed policies that have said oil is bad, we can't have oil. And then as soon as oil leaves, California's like, oh, but there's all these people that are still using gas. The demand is still there. How are we gonna serve our constituents?
How am I supposed to fill up my car and get to work? I mean, it's absurd.
It is. I think we're down. I'm gonna mess up the numbers, but it was something like down to 19 refineries, or
I think we're at like 12.
Okay, it's even
12
lower,
or 13,
yeah.
it's even less than
it's
that.
just like a tiny number compared to what it used to be.
Yeah.
And everyone that leaves is such a huge impact on cost, on supply, on affordability. I mean, it's incredible, right? And it is. It's just crazy. Some of the countries that have state-owned oil refineries: Russia, China, Venezuela, Iran. I mean, is this really a serious conversation?
Yeah, I don't think that's the model to follow, to be honest.
It's so. This article, could California be next on the list? That's not necessarily a group of countries I really want to be modeling.
Yeah, no kidding.
So really frustrating. I think I just think this is a terrible idea. I hope we don't do this. That being said, I think we absolutely do need to change policies in California to make sure these refineries can keep operating.
100%.
So,
I mean, just because we limit the supply doesn't mean we're going to have any impact on the demand. Californians say, hey, this is what we need. We got to answer that call.
well, and what do we do, by the way, when we don't have the supply but we still have the demand? We just bring in foreign oil. We burn, we put more emissions into the air, bring in dirtier
more expensive.
fuel. That's not,
It's counterproductive to our stated goals. No,
it's incredible. So hope we can not do that, and interesting to follow that story as well. We'll keep people updated on that as the year continues. I don't know if you saw this. Governor Newsom vowed to veto any measure put on his desk on the expanding the sanctuary state law in California. Mm-hmm. So any bill that protects criminals from deportation, which apparently is being floated as an idea in the Capitol, he has said that he will veto that legislation. I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know if that's a national aspiration sort of move, but I think it really is an important signal that he's sending the legislature, like, don't even try.
Yeah.
Like, do not send me a bill that makes our communities even less safe, right? Like, let's actually be sensible about
this. No, and
I
think that's great. I mean, I have constituents back home that I meet with regularly, and they're frustrated with the state of California's government. But it's encouraging to see the governor respond to the will of the people. I mean, I think Prop 36 was, and obviously the governor opposed that.
Which he opposed.
He opposed that, right?
Yeah.
But the voters sent him a clear message, and now he's kind of changing his tune. I think that's a good thing, right? And I think that it shows that the government is listening to you. We are listening to you. We want to be responsive.
Totally agree. I think, I don't know if any of our colleagues were going to put that bill forward. I did hear some rumors that was going to happen, but I'm thinking now that would probably not be wise.
I mean, bill introduction deadline passed. You can take a look and find out.
Yeah, I'm going to go through them. Our next episode, we'll have more time to really dive into all those.
If someone did author it, you should invite him on the pod.
Hey, I'm down. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's hash it out.
I'd like to come on too.
Sounds good. We'll tag team it. I think we're going to cut it there. Look, I will mention there was a lot of stories on the fires, right? And we don't really have time to go through every one of them, but just a few of the headlines. LA fires are sparking new proposals on streamlining building permits. I think that's a good thing. A conversation that has needed had. There was a huge story about the Fair Plan shortfall, essentially asking ratepayers to bail out $1 billion, or at least 50% of $1 billion of the shortfall for the Fair Plan. Mm-hmm. This is an impending disaster, in my opinion, for insurance rates.
100%.
State Farm had a insurance or a rate hike request shot down again by the insurance commissioner, at least temporarily. Myself and some colleagues introduced bills to crack down on looting in these states of emergency fire areas. There's just, and then Karen Bass fired the LA fire chief. So, I mean, there's just been a ton of stories on the fires. I think this will continue to obviously be a huge topic throughout the year, but I just want to give you a second if you have any thoughts on the fires or.
No, I mean, obviously first, just heart goes out to the victims and the folks who lost their homes and lost everything.
Yeah.
I will say on a positive note, and I've had conversations with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle in the administration, that this is a really good opportunity for us to take a look at some of these regulations that make it so burdensome to build in California. We have to rebuild Los Angeles. We have to go in there and get this right and get this fixed. And, I think it gives us a good opportunity to maybe re-examine some of the things the way we do certain things and say, does this really make sense? Is this really the best way to do this? Or can we clean this up and streamline it so we can get people back in their homes and back in their communities and rebuild? So, I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to make some real progress here, not just for LA, but statewide as a whole. Obviously, wildfires have devastated our state for a while. And with, and we've talked about this a lot, but from a fuel reduction standpoint, what can we do to better mitigate risk, right? Insurance companies are in the business of risk and risk management. And, when they sit there and they make their rates and set their rates, that's based on partially us for not doing a good job of being able to reduce fuels and being able to help prepare to prevent these things from happening and expanding. So I think there's a lot of productive conversations that can come out of this. So, well, obviously it was a terrible tragedy and extremely devastating for so many. I'm hopeful we can turn this into something positive and say, hey, let's not make just changes for LA, but for our state as a whole, so we can end up coming out of this better.
100%. I think that's a great point, and I do hope it sparks those conversations. You know, and the devastation, like, can something good come from that, right?
Yeah.
So 100% agree. So I'm going to try a new segment with you, if you don't mind.
Okay, let's do it.
I'm calling it satirical relief. Okay.
All right, I like that.
So I'm just going to look at the latest Babylon Bee headlines and
okay,
and just read some.
Let's go.
Because honestly, man, like, things are so serious, and just for anyone that could get offended by satire, like, it's satire, so we can just have some fun with it.
Yeah. Disclaimer.
So maybe turn down your skip forward in the podcast if you don't like satire.
There you go.
But these are pretty funny. So I'm not going to read a bunch, but like this one was today. Trump fired after forgetting to reply to Elon's email. That's pretty funny.
That's
okay,
good.
come
I like
on.
that.
I mean, that's good. Speaking of which, I will need an email from you, sir, of 5 things you accomplished last week.
Oh, I actually have this.
In order-
I already had ChatGPT write one for me because I assumed my staff was going to ask me. It was great. I said, make it
Your
as
constituents actually need to know that. What did you accomplish last week?
That's actually a good idea for an email blast.
It's actually
that would
not
be pretty
bad.
funny. People
just
would
like,
open that.
here's 5 things that I accomplished last week to justify my job. But yeah, I think every legislator should have to do that. Forget about the employees. Like, let's make legislators answer that.
I don't
question.
think it would be that challenging. I'm very happy. I mean, that seems
not for us. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, on a similar vein, oh no, Admiral Piet gets email from Lord Vader asking what he accomplished last week. That's a Star Wars joke. Pretty funny. Same vein.
my wife would get that right over my head.
You're not a Star Wars guy?
Yeah, I mean, like, I've watched Star Wars. I don't understand.
It's a little
that.
in the weeds.
Yeah.
Honestly, some of these tend to do that. I like this one. Congressional gridlock after Doge fires only government employee with key to the Capitol. That's
pretty good.
You know, I mean, come on. And then we'll just do one more here. Some of these are so bad I can't even read them. They're hilarious, but like, no, I'm not going to do it.
for the pod.
Trump envisions modern version of postal service where people can send mail electronically. I think that's pretty good. So there was a couple on like Mayor Bass and Newsom. I like reading those because they're more like California specific, and the Babylon Bee sometimes messes with them. But LA mayor promises full investigation into why she was allowed to become LA mayor. But you know,
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, I just love a little humor sometimes, and I think things have been. I think you mentioned at the beginning, things have been getting pretty crazy. So it's nice to break it up a bit.
You know, one thing you didn't bring up, I know we're out of time, but I actually do want to ask you about this because I found it fascinating. Did you see the governor over the weekend had a rollout on a more direct citizen engagement with the government? And he's sort of modeling this after his book. He wrote a book.
Citizenville,
It's
right?
one of my favorite
Citizenville.
books. I love that book.
Don't say that out loud.
Why?
No,
It's
I'm just
great.
kidding.
It's great. Everybody should read that book. It's such a conservative approach to governance too. That our governor
That's
wrote
hilarious.
it is interesting.
Does he live up to it? Is the question.
Well, that's what that's what we need, right?
Yeah,
I feel like I'm going to start pulling lines from it.
Just pull lines from his own book and send them to him.
See what he thinks about it.
Yeah.
But no, I
missed that.
I think there's a more expansive rollout today as well.
Okay.
But keep an eye out for that.
Keep an eye
Put
out
that
for
on the
that,
pod
yeah.
next week.
Okay. Yeah, we'll discuss that in the future. That sounds good. Before I let you go, I was going to mention another thing the governor put out I think Friday maybe. So the U.S. Mint is printing a commemorative dollar coin from every state with a specific state, like innovator from that state on it. And I guess the state or the governor or someone gets to decide who that innovator would be. So the governor, I actually support the governor on this, selected Steve Jobs as the innovator from
that's
California,
awesome.
which I think is pretty awesome. Steve Jobs is someone who, obviously, there's so many innovators in California, right?
I thought you were going to say the governor selected himself because he's been so innovative in making
because
more
of
homeless
Citizenville,
people.
Man, he wrote a book on it. Like, come on. No, thankfully he did not. But there's so many innovators, obviously in California specifically. How do you pick one? But I think if you were going to pick one, Steve Jobs has got to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, 100%.
So for our clip of the week this week, I'm going to play one of my favorite kind of stories. Steve Jobs telling one of my favorite stories. I remember first reading it in his biography by Walter Isaacson, which, by the way, I highly recommend. Great book. Really fascinating life Steve Jobs had. But I'll play this clip, and then we can react to it.
Most people don't get those experiences because they never ask. I've never found anybody that didn't want to help me if I asked them for help. I always call them up. I called up, this will date me, but I called up Bill Hewlett when I was 12 years old, and he lived in Palo Alto. His number was still in the phone book. And he answered the phone himself. He said, yes? He said, hi, I'm Steve Jobs. I'm 12 years old. I'm a student in high school, and I want to build a frequency counter. And I was wondering if you had any spare parts I could have. And he laughed, and he gave me the spare parts to build this frequency counter, and he gave me a job that summer in Hewlett-Packard, working on the assembly line, putting nuts and bolts together on frequency counters. He got me a job in the place that built them. And I was in heaven. And I've never found anyone who said no or hung up the phone when I called. I just asked. And when people ask me, I try to be as responsive, to pay that debt of gratitude back. Most people never pick up the phone and call. Most people never ask. And that's what separates sometimes the people that do things from the people that just dream about them. You gotta act. And you've got to be willing to fail. You've got to be willing to crash and burn, with people on the phone, with starting a company, with whatever. If you're afraid of failing, you won't get very far.
Is that something your fundraiser showed you when you first got up here?
No, but
I think that's great.
I love it.
My wife's a high school teacher.
Don't be afraid to fail.
And I talk to high school kids all the time. And one of the things I like to emphasize to them is how important relationships are. And not just in our business or in politics, but throughout life. And it's being able to have those conversations, reach out and make that ask. And I think that was perfect. And I know you were going to go into this, but you're going to fail and you're going to fall down, but get back up, right?
Yeah, no, I love it, man. It's there's a lot of great clips of Jobs out there. Obviously, he's a really smart guy. Also a really kind of like challenging guy to work with. I mean, my dad actually worked at Apple for over 20 years and got to work with him a little bit. And not the nicest guy in the world, but you know what? He got things done, and he motivated people to do what they didn't think was possible. And that was part of the wonder of Steve Jobs, right? Is Apple was able to innovate because he pushed them to, right? And I mean, this is a guy that I can't even remember. He was a little younger in this clip that we just played, but this is a guy that got fired from the company that he built.
That was pre-turtleneck.
Right? Yeah, exactly, right? I mean, he got fired from his own company, and I mean, talk about what quote unquote could be viewed as a failure, right? Apple didn't get nearly the market share that Microsoft did in its early stages, really was way behind in terms of personal computing and competing in that market. So much so, and then a number of other factors that got Steve Jobs fired from the job, from the company that he created in his garage, right? And so, or his parents' garage. So it was like, to then be able to come back to Apple many years later and save it from extinction, essentially, and then turn it into the world's most valuable company. I mean, it's a life story that I think you can learn a lot about and learn a lot from.
So great choice for the coin for California.
I think it's a great choice for the coin for California. I'm a big Steve Jobs fan, but any final thoughts from you before we let you go?
No, just appreciate you having me on and fun conversation. And I think, when Joe Patterson's not available, I'm always here to be your filler.
Sounds good, man. Next episode, so a couple weeks, we're going to have Ali Macedo on.
Okay.
So she's going to be our next guest. Ali is a new legislator from, I think, Tulare is her name. Yeah. So Central
she brought
Valley.
us down there to the World Ag Expo.
That's right.
Last
You
week.
went to that.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So yeah, we're gonna get to know Ali next week. I think that's one to definitely look out for. Really, just trying, like Jeff Gonzalez was a super fun one a couple weeks ago too. Just trying to get to know some of these new legislators, where they come from, their background, what they're working on. If you have ideas for future shows, you can email pointoforderpod@gmail.com. As always, listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Watch, subscribe, or follow follow on YouTube, X, Instagram, Threads, and Facebook at Point of Order Pod, and follow the host today on X at Joshua_Hoover for myself, and at ASM Wallis, I think, for you. Also, speaking of which, the word podcast, that's completely created by Apple. I mean, because
is it? I didn't know that.
Oh, dude, it was created by Steve Jobs because it was an iPod,
Right.
and broadcasting. That, like, he created the term podcast, which we still use today, which is hilarious because it's now a general term, right?
Yeah.
For just internet broadcasting is podcasting. He took iPod and broadcasting and he put them together, and Apple, and Steve Jobs coined the term podcast. So
while I was putting my Christmas tree away in the attic, I found my old iPod. So.
Did you? I still have some, man. I still have some. And my dad always jokes, like, he started with the company in 2001 when the first iPod came out, very first one. And he's like, man, the company really took off after I joined, Apple. And I'm like, yeah, also you joined when the year the iPod came out. So, who knows? Who knows, say that it wasn't him?
Exactly. I love that.
Anyway, great having you. See ya in the future. And,
Thank you.
thanks for
Appreciate it,
coming.
Josh. Thanks for having me.